So I have so far talked about so far only talked about two kind of loops, finite and infinite. This is for loop is an example of finite loop, and while loop is an example of infinite loop. Now I could actually convert any finite loop to an infinite and any infinite loop to a finite loop also. So for example, if you are printing 110, or you want people to give you um, you want people to ask 10 numbers as input from the user, or you want people to ask 50 to input 50 numbers, but there is a condition that they must not enter any negative number. The moment they enter any negative number, you want to stop the process. So have a look at this. This was a finite loop which was going to run 50 times. Now I'm saying here num is equals to, so this I had told you how to convert the input that is coming in Python into integer, because everything that you input in Python is by default string. So I'm asking enter a number, and I want that input which comes as a string to be converted into integer. Now if the number is being given as, if the number is less than 0, means the number is a negative number, then we want to stop the process. So, and we also want to print the count of numbers entered, during this process. So you can have a variable here, count equals to 0. I can have sum equals to 0. So whenever user is giving any number, I'm putting its sum in a variable sum. So I say sum is equals to sum plus number. Now what I want, whenever the user enter any negative number, the process should stop. So I'll break, and after coming out, I want to print the count and average of the input number. So I say the count of input numbers is, and I want to print the count. So I could print this count this is called count, and then I want to print the average. So in order to print the average, I could say that the average is calculated by sum divided by count, because if we divide mathematically sum of certain numbers by count, that gives me average. And here I write average of input numbers is this. So this is actually a program to take 50 numbers as input from the user. I'll make the font a little bigger for you all to understand and see it clearly. So I'll make it little bold and bigger on my screen. I hope it's little better now. So I have this particular program which takes 50 numbers. So I made it a finite loop to go 50 times, but I'm interrupting the loop in between by saying if the user puts any negative number, I will stop. On the other hand, if I just put it as an infinite loop, while true, not even 50 numbers. So I'm saying jab tak user positive number dega, I will keep taking the numbers. I will not stop the process. The moment I get a negative number, I'll stop the process. So then I say run. Now I'll save my program, and it says enter a number. Suppose I enter 12, 3, 4, 67, whatever. I'm entering multiple numbers. Now after a while, I enter a negative number. So let's say I enter a negative number. So the moment I enter negative number, okay, I think I did not increase the count by 1. After I'm taking any number, I have to say count is equals to count plus 1. That would increase the counting of my input number. So I'm saying count is equals to count plus 1. And then once I get any number as negative, outside I'm printing count, then it will increase. So I have to update my variable count. Now I'll now run the program and let us see the output. Now suppose my first number is this, my second number is this, third is this, and then I say -9. So count of input positive number is 3, and the average of positive numbers is this much. So this is how I have done my program. So basically it was an infinite loop. I used an infinite loop while true, but I made it finite by putting a exit condition from the loop. So the moment I enter a negative value, I will have a break from the loop. Then it will get converted from a infinite loop to a finite loop. I hope you all are with me till here. Can you say a yes or show a thumbs up in the chat window if we are good to go at this pace, if you are clear? Else I'll repeat the things. Can we move ahead with your permission? Can you say me yes in the chat window? Thank you. Thank you for your confirmation. Okay. Now, thank you, audience, for letting me know. Now, there are certain questions which can be solved by two tricks. Like either we use nested loop or we use conditions which can help us achieve the output. So let me first talk about certain series. So let's first focus on series question. So the series kind of question is, let's say I have this particular series which says x plus x squared plus x cube. So I'll just put it in the um, superscript form, and then I say xn. So for example, these are superscripts. So I want to find the sum of this series. Now, can you tell me what are the two unknowns here? So this is a question to find out the sum of these series. Can you let me know what are the unknowns here? If you have to write a program to find the sum of this series, what are the unknowns? Write a program to find the sum of this series. So I have to do this using Python. What are my unknowns here? Let me see if there are responses in the chat window. This is my question to be solved. Okay. What are my unknowns to do this question? What do I need as input to solve this question? Okay, let me take the question in Python. So I am here opening a new file. And this is my question. So the superscript went away when I brought it here. Now I want to put it as a comment entry because this is just a program. Uh, so I want to find the sum of this series, and these are powers. Can you please tell me what are my unknowns? What do I need to know before I start to do this program? Any answers from the audience? What do I need to know before I find the sum of this series in Python? I want to find the sum of series which goes from a variable raised to the power 1 to a variable raised to the power n. So what are my inputs before? See, when you start to do any program, we have discussed in the previous session, x and n. Thank you, Sarika ji. So we must know what are our inputs. अभी series का question करना है तो हमें x और n मालूम होना चाहिए. So before I actually start to find the sum of the series, I must know what is my x, and x is definitely going to be an integer, and I need to do explicit typecasting by converting my x as from string to an integer. So I would first take x and then I would take n as input. So I need the value of x and n as input. Now, once this is done, I need to run a for loop. So I would say that for I in range. Now, range has to be 1, 2, 3. You have to go up to 10 n terms. So you would say 1, comma n. Let me know, have I done any mistake in deciding the range of the loop? Is the range correct? Is the range correct, or I need to tweak it? I'm asking you, audience. Is the range correct, 1 to n, or I need to tweak it? And if I need to tweak it, what should be my range? N plus 1? Yes. Thank you. Good. It seems like you have got the point. So n plus 1, because the upper range is not included, so we have to go one step beyond to reach to the nth value. Now we need to have a variable sum. So what we need to initialize it to sum as 0. And then this sum is made up of multiple terms. So I'm saying term also as 0. Now, sum is a keyword. If you wish, you can take a variable with another name, su. Otherwise, we could take it as sum also. Now, my first term or my every term is rather going to be x raised to the power I. So I could use the power function of maths class. So I could use the import maths module here, and I could then use maths.pow, and I could give it as x raised to the power I as my term. So my every term is going to be the power x raised to the power I. And then what I want to do, I want to add this term to the sum. So I would say sum is equals to sum plus term. And then once I come out of the for loop, so I'll take my indentation in the line of for, means once I come out, I would say that print the sum of series is, and then I would say sum, and that's what is my program looks like. So I would take the variable name here as sum only because I've used it everywhere as sum, and these are my terms. So we wanted to calculate x raised to the power 1, x raised to the power 2, 3 up to x raised to the power n. That's why we have used it as a term. Now let's check it. Do you see any problem in terms of typecasting? Then let me know. So once we run it, we are giving the value of x as, let's say, 2. So, and for ease of calculation, value of this was to be n. So this is coming as 30. It means I need to find out, if I calculate it, 2 raised to the power 1 plus 2 raised to the power 2 plus 2 raised to the power 3 plus 2 raised to the power 4. This I have to calculate because I have given it as uh, value of x as 2 and n as 4. Now if I calculate it, this should be 2 plus 4 plus 3 is 8 plus 16. Now if I add it up, 16 and 4 is 20, and then 8 and 2 is 10, which is 30. So my answer through my program is also coming in correct. Now, okay, let me admit the people. So this is total answer is coming 30. It means my code is proper. Now, coming to the next part of it, imagine if I change this series. If I change this series like this. So, for example, now I'm increasing the difficulty level of the series. So I say that this series is like this: x divided by 1 factorial, x square divided by 2 factorial. So this is divided by 2 factorial. Then I have plus divided by 3 factorial, and x4 divided by 4 factorial. So for the interest of everyone, I would just like to say that what is factorial? Factorial is, if suppose you have n factorial, so this is n into, factorial is the sum of products of all the digits from 1 to that number. So for example, if you have 5 factorial, then this is equals to 1 into 2 into 3 into 4 into 5. Now, while this question is changed to this, now what do I need to do is I need to divide every term by factorial of a certain term. And I know that factorial itself requires, you know, okay, you want me to send the code in the chat window? I will do that. This is for the first question, Ashu ma'am. And then I'll share for the other question as well. So this is for the first program. Find the sum of numbers, all the positive numbers entered by the user, and the program stops when user enters negative number. Now this is the second program, sum of series. We will now modify this particular program and see if the series is changed as with the denominator. So if I now have a denominator, what I said that we will have it as divided by factorial. Now what should I do here? I need to find out the factorial. Now this particular factorial is the denominator. So this term which I was getting is the numerator. Now if I change this variable from numerator to, and I keep another variable as denominator, so I have two variable as numerator and denominator. So my numerator is this. But before I make my term and add it to sum, I need to find out denominator also. So how do I find denominator? I say denominator is initially 1 and then I run a for loop. So how do I run a for loop? I say for j in range 1 to j plus 1. Sorry, I plus 1, because if I am on the first term, I need to find out the factorial of 1. If I am on the second term, I need to find out the factorial of second. Now, since the upper range is not included, so I'm counting it as I plus 1. So what I'm saying here is denominator is equals to denominator multiplied by j. So this helps me find out the denominator. And when I come out of the for loop, I say my term is, now what is my term? So my term here is numerator divided by denominator, and then I add that term to sum. Now, how did I use the second loop? I use the second loop inside the first loop. Because what is the first loop doing? The first loop is controlling my number of terms. And now my question is changed. My question is changed like this. I have to work in 3 dimensions. What are those 3 dimensions? The first dimension says that find out the sum of a series which goes from first term to the nth term. The second dimension says that numerator is a variable which is the power, which has progressive powers from 1 to n. And then there is a denominator, which is my third dimension, which says that you have to divide it by the factorial of a specific number, which is going in sync with the powers. Now, this particular loop is to find out the factorial. So this loop, I could do comment entry here to increase the readability. This is to find out factorial of denominator. Now, if I run this very loop now and check my output, so if I take it like with the same example, I'll just do this correction, enter the value of x and enter the value of n. So I run this program and I say, okay. It says enter value of x. Now, suppose the value of x I enter there is again 2 and value of n is again, say, 4. This time the answer is 6. So let's work it out and see how it is 6. So we would then go to Word document once again. And while we were calculating it earlier, so this is if my x is 2. So 2 divided by factorial of 1. So 1 is 2 divided by 1 because factorial of 1 is 1. Then 4 divided by factorial of 2. Factorial of 2 is 2 into 1, which is again 2. Then x raised to the power 3, which is 8. 8 divided by 3 factorial. So 3 factorial is 3 into 2 into 1, which is 6. So we have 6 here. Then we have x raised to the power 4, which is 16. 16 divided by 4 factorial. So 4 factorial is 24 because it is 4 into 3 into 2 into 1. So we have 24. Now, once we calculate this, so if you calculate this, 2 divided by 1 is 2, 4 divided by 2 is 2, 8 divided by 6, it takes the numerical part and it actually omits the, so for example, it gives the integer part. So if I divide 8 by 6, it is 8 1 ja 8, and then it would come out as 2 will be the remainder, and then 0.3 something, whatever it goes. And then 16 divided by, so 16 divided by 24. So this was 4 factorial, x raised to the power, sorry, 2 raised to the power 4 is 16. And we are dividing it by factorial of 4, which is 24. So it would again come up as 0 point something. So before I do that, I want to tell you something like this. So suppose you do it 6 single divide 2, you must know this. This is 3. But if I do 8 divide by 6, now this is coming exact. But if I do 8 double divide by 6, so this is coming 1 because this does double divide as floor division. You must note that double divide is floor division and this is exact division. Now, similarly, if you do it by 16 divided by 24, so this is 0.66 whatever. And then if you do 16 double divided by this, so this is coming as 0. So since we are doing double this one as exact division, so this would be 1.33 whatever. And then you have this as 0.6 something, so which would make 6 as a whole. That's why the answer was coming as 6.0. So this is, we saw our answer as sum of the series as 6. So this is the code. Now in these kind of series question, I need nested loops. Why do I need nested loop? One loop is controlling, this is the outer loop. So this is my outer loop to control the number of terms. So here the outer loop is controlling loop to control the number of terms in series to find the sum of series. So this is how it goes, and this is inner to find the factorial of denominator. So that's how this goes. Now this is one use case example of to find the sum of series where you might need nested loop. I'll give you another perspective now. If you have any doubt in this, please let me know through the chat window. So I'm giving this code as well in the chat window to find the sum of series where the denominator is factorial. So here is the code for the second series. Now, let me know if there are any questions. Otherwise, I'll give you one more sample problem to think about where it can be, we can use nested loops. Okay. Now, for example, here, you have x divided by, let's say we have x divided by 1. Then I have plus, then I have x only, and then divided by 1 multiplied by 2. So then plus x divided by 1 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 3. And I have plus x divided by 1 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 3 multiplied by 4. Then I have again x divided by 1 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 3 multiplied by 4 multiplied by 5, whatever, and so on. And then we goes up to x divided by 1 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 3, and this goes on up to multiplied by n. So in this kind of question, one, I need a loop outside which would control my terms from 1 to nth term. So since we have nth number of terms, so it is controlling my number of terms. Second, I need a loop to decide my denominator, because my denominator is a product. So I have to bifurcate. Whenever you see a sum of series question, some could be very, very simple, like we did the first one, which has only numerator. Some could have both numerator and denominator, but both can be controlled through single loop. For example, if it could have been sing x plus 1, x divided by 2, x divided by 3, dot, dot, x divided by n. Now, this can be done using a single for loop. So I could just say that for I in range, and I could have taken it as 1, comma, n plus 1. And I could have simply said that sum is equals to sum plus, and I could have written it as x divided by I. So this was super simple. With the help of one loop only, I could have done this question. But now coming to this question, let me take it in the Python interface and have another program. Now suppose I have to do this question. Now for this question, my inputs remain the same, which is x and n. So I just copy it from here. X and n are going to be my input. So I would take those from user, and I'll make it as a comment entry. So let me just close this window. So this is my x and n I have taken as input from the user. I could mark it as capital small. That is that will not make a difference. Now I'm running my for loop from for I in range. This is my outer loop, which will control my number of terms, which are going from 1 to n plus 1, because I have to go up to n terms. I can have a variable with the name sum, because whatever questions are related to sum of terms, you could always have sum and term. If you want to calculate numerator denominator separately, have a variable numerator, have a variable denominator, and have a variable term. So keep your variables sorted so that you are not confused yourself, and you are making it clear what variable is for what purpose. So when you get into the loop, your numerator is sorted. What is numerator? Numerator is only x. So we are sorted. That numerator will always be x. But denominator, yes, I need to calculate it. So when I have to calculate it, it will always start from 1. So I'm keeping the denominator as 1, and I'm taking a for loop for j in range. So denominator has to go from, if the loop is running for the first time, 1. If loop is running for the second time, up to 2. If loop is running for the third time, it has to go up to 3. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say 1 comma I plus 1, because I have to go one more beyond I, because loop will then stop at I. Upper range is not included. So I go from j goes from I to 1 to I plus 1, and then I say denominator is equals to denominator multiplied by j. So this inside loop is calculating my denominator, which is 1 into 2, 1 into 2 into 3, 1 into 2 into 3 into 4. So this is deciding my denominator for every term. Then I say term is equals to numerator divided by denominator. And then I say sum is equals to sum plus term. And then after coming out of the for loop, I simply print the sum of the given series is, and then I say sum. Have a look at this, and I'll come back and ask a question from you. Now, I hope you have checked this particular solution. So have a look at it and let me know, are you clear that why did we take nested loop here? Now let me just run and show you the output. Value of x, let me take it as 2. You could let us take 3. Value of n as, okay, suppose 4. Okay, I think I messed up with capital and small. So this is capital N plus 1, and this was taken as small n. So I'll just take it as small n. Okay, run once again. So value of x is 3 and value of n is 4. The sum of given series is 5.125. So let us calculate it manually. So this is coming as 3 and 5 for this. So if my x was 3, so 3 divided by 1 plus 3 divided by 2 plus 3 divided by 1 into 2 into 3, which is 6, plus 3 divided by 1 into 2 is then 6 4 is 24. Now, if you see this is 3, if you see this is 1 point something, so 1.66 recurring figure, then this is 0.3 is divided by 6, so 0.5, and then plus 3 divided by 24, so it is 0.1 something. So this all totals to 5.125, which is roughly coming like this. So the program is correct, that assures us. So the whole point of saying means doing this problem is to help you understand where do you use nested loop. Loop inside a loop is called a nested loop, and majorly these loops are required when you solve these three-dimensional problems where there is a loop which is controlling the overall progression of the program, and there is a loop which is either controlling the numerator or controlling the denominator. So I'll just pass on the code for this. I'll just take 1 minute pause and keep my eyes on the chat window. Please let me know if you are fine with what we have done so far. Is it going above the head? My speed is very fast, or are you comfortable? Please let me know, then I will move with the pattern programs. Okay, thank you, Anuradha ma'am. Okay. Now, after my second agenda was, while we are doing this programs of nested loops, its second biggest utility comes in pattern printing. Imagine you have to print a pattern like this. Suppose you want to print a pattern like this. Now, if I have to print a pattern which goes endlessly, now just first, whenever you get to see any pattern, first think that what is happening in this pattern. So if I think about this very pattern, what is happening here? So here, there is first a pattern which is going into rows. So for example, the question says, write a program to enter n. Now, if value of n is 6, generate a pattern like this. So iska matlab, this was our input. So if input would have been 5, then I would have gone till here, not on the sixth row. So my n is deciding the number of rows. So there is something that is showing progression in terms of showing progression in number of rows. So number of rows are getting progressive from 1 to n. So एक loop मुझे इसलिए चाहिए, one loop is to show progression in number of rows from 1 to n. Second, if you notice, row number 1 had one item printed. Row number 2 had two items printed. Row number 3 had three items printed. Row number 4 had four items printed. Row number 5 had five items printed. So it means the number of columns, the second loop will manage the progression, which is progression of columns in each row. Like I told you, row 1 will have only one column. Row 2 has two columns. Row 3 has three columns. So एक loop की जरूरत हमें यहाँ भी लग रही है कि if there are n rows, n row पर n columns होंगे. तो देयर आर टू लूप्स. एक लूप रोज डिसाइड करेगा और एक लूप ये डिसाइड करेगा कि उसके अंदर कितने कॉलम्स हैं. सो दिस इज माय लूप 1 and this is my loop 2. Now let us start. If you are clear with this part, why to do these kind of questions, we need nested loops. Then let me just write a program for this and then see how can we actually use nested loop to do that. Let me see if there are a few more people in the lobby. I would request everybody to join on time. Okay, now, Poonam ji, I see your hand raised. You can please go ahead and tell me your problem. Poonam, I think you can unmute yourself or type in the chat window. Okay, I think maybe by mistake. Let's move ahead. So I was saying that when we do coding for nested loops, this is like a pattern. So let me just comment it out. I could use multi-line comments also rather than doing it for every line. So I hope you are aware that comments are the non-executable part of a program. They are just for your reference and they are not seen on the screen once you start the program and are ignored by the compiler. Now, suppose I want a number to be taken as input from the user. So I have this input function and I am writing here, provide n. And n would decide my rows for the pattern. So once I've got n with me, I know that my pattern has to go from, for I in range, would go from 1 to n plus 1 for sure. You all have understood why n plus 1, because upper range is not included. Now, this is for deciding my number of rows. So it's better I take my variable name also as user-friendly for row, so that I know that this is controlling my number of rows. Now I have to create columns. So हर row पर कितने column होने चाहिए? जितना row number है. So I would say for column in range, 1 comma row plus 1. Why plus 1? Because upper limit is again excluded. So every column must have कितने कॉलम बनने चाहिए जितने रो नंबर पर हम हैं. If we are on third row number, we must have 3 columns. If we are on fourth row number, we must have 4 columns. That's why my columns are controlled by row number and my rows are controlled by value of n. Now what do I have to do here? I have to print something. What do I print? Should I print column or I print row? So here, if you see, it is progressing. It is progressing from 1 to 2, 1 to 2 to 3. So what is progressing? My column numbers are progressing. So I would print here column and I would say plus slash t, because backslash t helps me to provide print a tab here. So I think there will be an error. Let me rectify that. It has to be a comma. Okay, first let me just, there will be an error that would come. So I had to put a comma here. And now let us test it once. So if, for example, my row number is 5, then it is coming this way, 1, 1, 2. I need to print it in the form of a triangle. So let me do that. Now, after a particular, all the columns should be printed on the same row. Now, by default, the end of line character changes in Python when you print. So end of line character we want as space. We don't want that, our printing should go to new line. So the end of line character I'm printing as blank, but I want printing to the line break to come once all the column on a row are printing. So what I'm doing is I'm specifying my end of line character here. So I would say 5. Now see, the pattern has come like this. So we want to print all the columns on the same line. So that's why I'm saying end of line character is space. If you wanted to avoid this, you did not want to give a space equal to 1 tab, you could have said your end of line character is equals to 2 spaces, let's say. Then the space would have been minimized. So now suppose I say pattern n is 10. Now see, there is a space of 2 in each of the column. So this is a pattern which I have just printed, and the pattern is spread over rows and column. Why I needed 2 particular loops to control this? My outer loop is controlling number of rows. So this is a loop to control number of rows. And this is my inner loop. This is a loop to control printing of columns on a certain row. I hope it's making sense. And END decides the end of line character. By default, if you don't put END, everything goes to a new line. In Python, by default, everything goes to a new line. So I don't want the cursor to, after printing the value of column, to go to a new line. The cursor must stop after giving 2 spaces. Now, once you are done with this much, once you have printed column for a specific row, let's say I printed these 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the cursor must go to new line. That's why using print command, I have printed a blank line here so that my cursor goes to the next line. Now I'll give you this particular code in the chat window. And now this is my code for this piece of pattern. Now imagine if I change here the printing from column to row. Can somebody tell me what would happen? If I change this from column to row, what would happen? Can anyone tell me? Instead of column, I'm printing rows. What would happen? You could unmute yourself or type in the chat window what would happen now. So I'm displaying my question once again. So I was saying that I have changed this from column to row. Now what should happen? In the printing, in the second loop, after print, earlier it was column. Now I've changed it to row. Can anybody tell me what kind of pattern would come in the output now? 1, 2 to Tripti ji, thank you so much. So now, because we are printing on each column the row number, so if the 5 columns get created on a row, all will have the row number. So if I run this very program, my pattern would be, if I suppose say now 20, so it would be on each of my row, the same number is coming. It's not coming like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because we are printing row number instead of column. So I'm printing now row number. That's why every row is saying whatever column is created, number of column creation is same. But instead of column number, I'm printing the row number. That's why my pattern is coming like this. Now, what if I change it with a static, neither row nor column? I change it with a character. Then only that character would be printed on row and column pattern. Now suppose I give my pattern as 10. So see, the pattern will be formed with this character, because here neither I'm printing row nor I'm printing column. I'm printing a specific character. So this is how you would use nested loops for pattern printing. I would brainstorm on certain complex pattern as well when we meet tomorrow. So tomorrow we would do some more, recurring loops, and we'll go in some more pattern printing. And I will discuss some specific output type questions also, patterns with reverse loops, pattern with forward loop. So I have not discussed today about reverse loops. So reverse loops are also great loops to help support us with various logics. Now, suppose you were to print a pattern like this. So I'm leaving it to you to brainstorm, and I'll take it up from here tomorrow. Now, suppose you had a pattern like this. Now, how would you deal with those scenarios where you are using descending patterns, or you are using descending numbers to generate patterns? So there are two things that are happening here. One is the pattern is descending from 5 terms, it is coming to 1 term. Secondly, it's not going from 1 to 5, it is going from 5 to 1. So we need to, understand all of these as well. Even if it's a progressive pattern, it could be, printing like this. So it could be 1, then it could be 2, 1. So think of all those combination. It could be then 3, 2, 1. We could have these kind of patterns which are ascending, but on each row the printing is happening descending. So we could, have this way of patterns also. So while you are thinking of logic and brainstorming it with your students, make sure think out of the box and give them challenges. If you have told them about straight pattern, let the students think the logic for the reverse pattern. So reverse pattern, you could leverage the reverse loops, which we had discussed earlier. But tomorrow when I begin the session, I would take it forward from first reverse loop, and then some of the descending patterns. How could we take it from there? The other major utility of nested loops is uh, in various solving various complex problems. Say, for example, if you are being asked to do twofold of problems, let's say write a program to print perfect numbers between 1 to 100. So one loop is required to control 1 to 100. Second is required to find out the logic of the perfect number. So you would require, nested loops in complex problems like that as well. So that's why I said that once we brainstorm on the utility of the loops, tomorrow we would, in tomorrow's 1 hour session again, we would see two major things: reverse loops, reverse patterns, and the complex problems, the twofold, fourfold problems, where you need to find out a specific type of numbers within a specific range. So you need two loops there, one to control the range and one to control the logic for the number. And we would also do more questions on while loop, because today majorly we did all the problems using for loop. And once loops are done in the next weekend, we would then move to functions. So we had this break of little series because of the festive season in between, and people were on Diwali break, and then there were breaks due to pollution and all. So we thought that the attendance would be minimum, and so we took a month break, and the flow in between was discontinued. So I apologize for that, but I think now we will have again these coding sessions which will continue topic wise. So once I finish the loops tomorrow, and then we will move on to functions, and then from functions we will take on to using list dictionaries and other data types in detail. Thank you so very much for joining today, and I hope to meet you all once again tomorrow. Till then, have a great evening and great Sunday tomorrow, and we'll meet in the evening. Thank you once again, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Anshulji. Thank you, Ashumam, for your comments. Thank you, everybody, for joining.